Thank you, councillors. Please be seated. Again, same goes. If anybody wants to take off the jackets, please feel free to do so. It is incredibly warm in here. Okay. Are there any official apologies for absence at all? No? Okay. Declarations of interest. I just need to remind you all to declare the interest on the item on the agenda it refers to. Can I also remind all councillors that you must declare the type of interest that you have, the agenda item, and the reason why you have an interest in that particular item. So do we have any declarations? Councillor Clapham?
I'd like to declare a personal interest on Blackpool Opportunity Area Programme, Priority 3, Post-16 Transition, as I am the Vice Chairman of the Board of Directors at Blackpool Sixth Form. That's on page 28.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clapham. Any other declarations of interest at this point? Nope. Fantastic. Okay, can I just ask that we take note of the minutes of the last meeting held on the 22nd. Can we all agree those minutes? Can I see a show of hands for those that agree? Great. Fantastic. I think that's unanimous. Wonderful. In terms of announcements, there's just a couple of things that I wanted to say. So we need to say congratulations to Ella Penswick. She's from the Resources Directorate. She received the Apprentice of the Year award at Blackpool and the Fylde College Awards ceremony. I was pleased to be there when she received her award, so that was really nice on behalf of the council. So well done to her. And also to say thank you to those councillors that were able to be with us on Monday at the official flag raising. We started off Armed Forces Week this week, as many of you will know. Particular thanks to Councillor Robertson for leading that particular ceremony for us. We did have quite a good showing, and I know a lot of people appreciated those of us that were there. Okay, so moving on, can we start on the executive reports? So first of all, can I call on Councillor Blackburn, please?
Thank you very much, Lady Mayor. Before I give my report, I would remind the Chamber, Lady Mayor, that we mark the very sad 4-year anniversary since Elaine and Dennis Thwaites were murdered whilst on holiday in Tunisia. I'm sure the thoughts of everybody in the Chamber are with their family. On a slightly happier note, Lady Mayor, tomorrow, I believe, I hope I've got this right, tomorrow is the 45th anniversary of Councillor David Owen being elected to the council.
It isn't quite. It's the 25th of July.
25th of July.
Close though.
Well, not far off. This will be our only opportunity to mark that event before the date itself. We all know Councillor Ivan Taylor, who will be with us shortly, I'm assured, clocked up 50 years of service earlier on. Well, David's hot foot behind him on very nearly 45 years of service. So, I've been here 16 years and it feels like a very long time. I can only imagine what 45 years must feel like. So congratulations to David. Lady Mayor, it gives me great pleasure to present my report. Just a couple of issues that I'd like to highlight. Officers have, of course, worked phenomenally hard on delivering flawless municipal elections, which they had plenty of time to plan for, and equally flawless European elections, which they had hardly any time to plan for. So I'd like to thank them. Very much for that. You will note. Members will note, Lady Mayor, on the financial monitoring on page 7, that working balances now stand at approximately £7 million. That is down almost entirely to the work of Steve Thompson and his team, so I want to thank them. You'll forgive me, I hope everybody forgives me, I'm trying to get the hang of this iPad thing, but I'm going to be flicking between the iPad and the paper because I can't do it all. You will note, members will note, Lady Mayor, that collection rates of both council tax and business rates are up in year, which we're pleased to note. And I'm delighted to say, the item that straddles pages 8 and 9, that we have, of course, been successful in our latest round of funding bids for the Blackpool Museum project, having been awarded £4 million from the what was formerly the Heritage Lottery Fund, which is great news. With that, Lady Mayor, I shall sit down and I'm delighted to answer any questions that members might have.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blackburn. Okay, so we'll take it as standard, page by page. So please indicate if you have any questions on the page I read out. So first of all, page 7. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I too would like to echo my congratulations to our financial team who continue to do a sterling job on behalf of everyone in this town. I think the results and the differences they've made, especially in working balances, are very encouraging. So I congratulate Steve and the whole of your team on that. One thing I do have a question about in the final paragraph, a technical accounting adjustment regarding debt payments. I just wonder if you could outline or be more clear on what a technical adjustment is. I know it's in terms of our PFI debt to Lancashire County Council, whether we overpaid or whether we added or distracted or abstracted, I should say, a naught. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Lady Mayor. I'll get used to that.
It's all right. Anybody that gets that wrong can put a £5 in the donation box for the empowerment charity. So I'm warning you now. You get one for free. Okay, any more questions on page 7? Nope, fantastic. Page 8. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Now that I know there's a £5 fine, I'll be very strict on that. My question really is it's an economic question rather than a political question for the leader around the financial collections review. Our business rates are retained rate is around 49% and we're moving in a direction towards 75%, whilst at the same time our revenue support grant is declining. So my question for the leader, Lady Mayor, is my question for the leader, Lady Mayor, is will our capital projects that we're embarking on bring in enough business rates that will make up the gap and the shortfalls from the decline of our revenue support grant? And will that plan work?
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Within the financial collections review on page 8, it clearly states that the amount of council tax collected has risen by 4 million and that this rise was due to increases in both council tax and the base. Now, given that the current council tax arrears is now standing at 17.5 million compared to 16.8 in 2018, can the leader of the council give assurances that everything that can be done in order to collect this money is being done? Can I also ask the council leader if residents of Blackpool, they will not see further increases in their council tax rate due to these arrears? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Just a note on the first paragraph about the hardness of the austerity cuts that they've hit. I'm given to understand, and the leader knows this, that there's going to be some changes within the LGA committees, the executive committees, and I'm also given encouragement from the people who are vying for positions on that they are going to continue to lobby the government for more payment to local authorities. And it will be an arduous case to show need, and I'm sure that both Councillor Blackburn and myself will be doing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other questions on page 8? Fantastic. Page 9. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Just a brief question as regards the Blackpool Central progress. A number of our capital projects, as all members will be aware, are currently behind, Lady Mayor. I just wondered what the leader can do to reassure the Chamber in terms of what will be different about how this project's managed that will not allow it to fall behind as our current ones have.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I'm on the same subject. There's still some concern that the longevity of this particular attraction will actually happen. Chariot of the Gods is one of the oldest of these flying theatre rides. There are now, at this very moment, new rides being on in the same buildings which have been there for a while. Of course, there's one of these theatres in Ferrari Park in Salou in Spain, and it's bigger than the one we've got. There's also another one at in Germany at Europa Park, which again is bigger than the one we've got. Well, whatever it is, they are bigger. I think ours is 100 seats. I think the one in Salou is 120. It's a 4-minute ride, and it takes 3 years to change the ride. I understand. And the cost is the same. Or the rides have got a 3-year life, Lady Mayor. That's what I was told by an operator. And then they have to be changed, which is extraordinarily expensive. Are we going to be taking enough money to afford that change? Is it down to the operator to afford that change? The technology is moving at an incredible pace. And we're already looking at the one in Salou especially. It's more than 360 degrees. It's actually almost 480 degrees the way it works. I'm just concerned that with the delays within this project, if there are going to be any delays, and let's face it, our history on delivering our major products always contains delays, as we're seeing at the moment. I'm sorry, Councillor Blackburn, but it's true. I just would like to know, can we be sure this is going to have longevity? It's a twice ride. I believe the repeats are just 2. Not quite as what Nicole have suggested. I've done other research as well, as you know I would do. And the other thing I'd like to sort of look at so far is just when will the whole project be finished? We're talking about one ride, but there's a whole project here. There's a whole raft of different things happening in there. That's number one. And secondly, within this paragraph, it says we are progressing with the sale of the land. Now, I understood it, Lady Mayor, that we were not selling the land. It would be rented and that we would retain the ownership. And that was one of the benefits of actually going with this plan. Are we now saying we are selling the land? It is going to happen. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other questions on page 9, please? Page 10. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. It follows up with a point that's in page 9 and feeds into page 10. It's about the fibre optic link, and I was delighted to see the leader reference this, and the deputy leader will know how passionate we all are about this subject in terms of what it can do for Blackpool, in terms of the technology, the competitive advantage that this gives us over every other city in the UK, bar Newcastle and London, is huge. So my question to the leader, because it was a discussion that we had in scrutiny, and which is why I was so pleased to see it featured in his report, is the way that we will deliver this technology and this service both to business and domestic customers will be through a cooperative. My view is that it would be best done if that's done through something that brands it around a Blackpool unique name or brand that people can identify almost as their connection to the town, in the same way that Hull residents would connect into Kingston Telecoms in the past. This is our version. So it is really to, again, seek assurance from the leader that great that it's in his report, but also that it's one of his priorities to see that this doesn't drift, but also that we do market it as a Blackpool unique product.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. A little bit on the same subject, actually. My youngest son is a senior design director for Virgin, and I'm pleased to say that Virgin fibre optic cable will be laid in Cleveland's next year, end of this year, next year. I'm also pleased to report that Virgin, although this is not widely known yet, are experimenting with microwave. And the ability of microwave is that you could actually download 4 full movies to a device or a phone in 1 second, which is quite amazing. So if we add all this together with what we've got coming through the Atlantic line and what Virgin are prepared to do going forward, and there are other operators other than Virgin, I think we can clearly say that Blackpool will have a very strong advantage in terms of communication. And if anything attracts business, it's transport and communication. So I'm very pleased to see that this is going to go ahead, and I'm very pleased to hear that Virgin are doing more as well. That microwave system may even start in Blackpool, so we'll have to wait and see on that. The other thing was about the enterprise zone, if we could carry on the same page, but Lady Mayor. Could we have a list or a directory of businesses that are now operating on the enterprise zone? because I don't think it's known publicly who's there. Perhaps the Gazette may have a list, but we don't. And the final thing was about the airport, and I'm delighted that we're having improved landing systems put in there to help the offshore helicopter contract. But everyone knows that contract is going to finish in approximately 9 years. And I don't see, because the gas is running out. That's been stated. It's not, oh, they're going to go.
Sorry, I can't.
It's the halo.
All right, okay, folks. So
it's
it
the
is
halo.
difficult operating
why
in
we-
these circumstances,
That's
but
why you
carry
can't
on,
see it.
Councillor
Others
Williams.
would say you're very fortunate that you can't see me, so don't worry about it. We don't seem to be doing much. I mean, I get the gist that we are trying to advance the enterprise zone. We are trying to get investment in that. But when we lose the helicopters, that's a big piece of business. And whether or not there is anything out there that we can do it, I just would like to see, Lady Mayor, a lot more effort in trying to get this airport into a regional hub airport or a hopper airport. Instead, we're selling it as a part of the enterprise zone, but we're not actually saying what it can do and what it can't do, other than it's an airport. And you know I'm a bit passionate about that, so I'd like to know that, Lady Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other questions or comments on page 10? Page 11? Councillor Galley.
Don't worry, I haven't got that many questions. So it'll be a short gig tonight. Yeah, it was regarding the domestic waste service and so on. And the little line at the bottom there, good luck to John and the new service. And absolutely, if this is going to be one of those services that impacts the residents, this is it. And we'll know very quickly if it's working or not. But I mean, like all of us, we have huge faith in John Hawking to do proud to this service. But my question isn't so much about the delivery of waste. It's actually where it leaves the Community and Environmental Services Directorate. Because John Hawkins is a big player in that area. And we already know John Blackford, he's not here tonight, but he's incredibly gifted, brilliant officer. We're all really proud of him. And he all works really hard for the people of the town. But it's to make sure that in taking John to deal with the waste option, we don't leave community environmental services exposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Callow.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Can I just say you've had some lovely photographs in the paper this week. It's been lovely. Well done. I'd like to speak on the early years health visiting model. This is something that I welcome very much, but I would just like to ask, is there any resistance at all from parents, you know, in their cooperation? And another thing that bothers me is that we have got rather a transient population here in Blackpool, and perhaps some of those families are the very ones that we should be reaching, and that does bother me, that they may just go off into the distance and we've lost them. So I would like the leader to answer those two questions. And I am delighted that you're having problems with your iPad, because I just thought it was me that was thick and couldn't get used to them. But you've joined the club, and congratulations, it's made my night. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Councillor Collett.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. On the same subject, just to say congratulations on all the good work that the health visitors have done. But also, can we ask the leader of our council that when he meets with our representatives from the health authority, from the hospital, that he does everything he can to ask for their further involvement and better involvement with these kinds of strategies. This kind of strategy only came about because we had to force our way through the door and give some money. And that's something that we discuss quite a lot in our children's services. There is much more work that we could do with midwives, with other projects, and that we have similar barriers to. I think when you look at the results of this project, actually it shows how worthwhile and a bit more collaboration can go a lot longer and stretch minimal resources a lot further. And it was just to see if he will grant his support to working a bit more collaboratively with some of our partners. Thank you very much, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Collett. Any more questions or comments on page 11? Okay, page 12. Page 13. General questions. Councillor Mrs. Callow.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. On this report, we've got some excellent news about developments in the town centre, which I'm sure that we all welcome. but I'm going to stand up again and say how disappointed I am. In fact, I'm appalled about the old Clifton Hotel, this hotel here, that's getting tattier and tattier by the day. I do believe that one of our officers was having a meeting with their management way back in October, but we don't seem to be getting anywhere. And in my opinion, they're letting the side down. And we've got some big hotels in this town who are actually letting everybody down. And if for 2 minutes, if I can just be parochial, can I mention the Norbreck Hotel, which as the councillor in that area, I get so many complaints about. And year in, year out, I get complaints about the fact that to their rear, they have got some grass. They're loath to cut it. It is growing into the gardens of all the houses that back onto it. A lot of those people are actually elderly or disabled, and I have sent emails to the manager some 2 or 3 weeks ago. I haven't even had a response, and the grass is growing like mad, and it's right up to the fences and causing a lot of aggravation. And I do get very angry about that. They're very, very bad neighbours. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Councillor Williams?
General questions, but I'd just like to follow on from Councillor Callow. Yes, the hotel down there in Talbot Square is looking a mess. But I've got to say, I think this building also is looking a bit jaded, to say the least. If you look at the paintwork of the windows, or even the state of the windows themselves, a good clean wouldn't go amiss. I don't think it would cost a fortune to do it. And I just think we need to spruce this up. As long as we're here, I hope this is the town hall. It's not Bickerstaff House, it's the town hall and represents the town as such. But the thing I really wanted to talk about is something that both Councillor Blackburn and I have agreed to sort of work on, which is, and I'll say this in inverted commas, the homeless situation in Blackpool. We arranged a meeting, but I deferred that because I want to find out more what's going on in the town. And I've done that. I've gone out to some soup kitchens and to an evening place, and I've learnt a great deal about the variance that is not only causing the problem, but perhaps isn't really a problem. It's just that it's so varied. And I've just had a quick word with our colleague and Director of Health, Arif, and he and I agree on some of the things. A lot of it's based on mental health, substance abuse, etc., the way benefits are paid direct to tenants instead of going to landlords and all the procedures that go around that. And I wanted to find all that out before you and I had a meet, so, and I know you've worked in social work with that, so I just thought it would do that. And to do that to the end, I'm actually meeting with Rabbi Silverman tomorrow in Manchester. Rabbi Silverman wants to start a commune, sort of like a kibbutz in Manchester for the homeless. And again, having spoken to him on a couple of occasions, he feels the same way. He wants this sort of central location, which would be almost like centre point, where various amounts of issues with individuals could lead to homelessness. And there would even be homeless people there, but it would be a centre where you could attack or treat the problems that these individuals have in one location. Because at the moment, and I'm sure Councillor Hugo is aware of this, it's fairly scattered and widespread. And the new money that's coming in from the government, I don't want this just to be £5 band-aids. You know, going out response and make sure people get fed. I can tell you, you can get fed free 7 days a week in Blackpool. Food isn't the issue. A lot of the people who are taking this as a food bank are not necessarily there because they're hungry. They're there because they're socially excluded. And that in itself can lead to other problems and, of course, into homelessness itself. So I'm going to be very interested in listening to the Rabbi tomorrow to see what he's got to say. And he said that he will work closely with me going forward. So we're going to share best practice. Funding is the biggest thing, of course. We need to find out how he's going to fund that. And after I've done that, then hopefully Councillor Blackburn and I can arrange that meeting again and we'll discuss it further. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. General questions, Councillor Robertson?
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Thank you for your kind words. Lady Mayor, I'd just like to thank the Council for offering me the role as the Armed Forces Champion for Blackpool Council. And also, it was a pleasure and an honour to stand on the steps of Blackpool Council on Monday morning giving the speech to open up the Armed Forces Week. And can I remind everybody that Armed Forces Week goes on till Sunday this week, and everything's in the boot. And please show your support for Armed Forces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Any other questions, comments, general ones for Councillor Blackburn? No, fantastic. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Councillor Williams asked me about the PFI reserve. I am told that what we're doing now is the correct accounting treatment, i.e. the money is now being kept where it's supposed to be kept rather than a separate reserve. That's not to say that there might not be a call on that reserve at some point, but it's now been held in the right place. If you press me any further than that, I'm afraid we've now reached very much the outer limits of my understanding of this sort of thing. But I'm assured by our Section 151 officer and by the Chief Executive that this is the right way to do it. And as I understand it, if that's not the case, they're the ones that go to prison and not me. I clarified that first. Councillor Galley wanted to know whether or not our commercial activities and the increase in business rates will be enough to plug the hole left by the government's cut to the revenue support grant. My honest answer to that is it had better be, right? Because if it isn't, we're in serious bother. But the local authorities, it's not just Blackpool, up and down the country are being forced into money making in a variety of creative methods. We're choosing to do it through the Business Loans Fund because that has you sort of get more bang for your buck because you're building things, you're creating jobs, you're hopefully attracting new visitors, and the council's making a turn on that money as well. But yeah, it had better be, because I don't see that the government hasn't promised us a date for a spending review. As Councillor Williams referred to, the LGA is pressing the government very hard on the fair funding formula, but at the moment, as it stands, local authorities in England and Wales do not know how much money they will have to spend from the 31st of March next year, and that you would not run any other business in that kind of way. So yeah, I hope so, is the honest answer. Councillor Walsh, yes, thank you for your question. We don't just pursue arrears in year. We pursue council tax arrears for 6 years. So we don't give up if people haven't paid in year. One of the reasons for the increased collection rate at the moment, but also a reason for the increase in historic arrears, is because of the changes that we've made over the past 5 or 6 years to the council tax reduction scheme. The government withdrew funding for it and passed the costs of that onto local councils. We have changed the council tax reduction system, I think, in every year of its existence. And this year, we think we've refined it to a point whereby we're asking people to pay 27.11% of their council tax, who we believe are reasonably likely and able to do that. Sending people who are dependent on disability benefits a bill that they have no means to pay necessarily means a rise in arrears and a fall in collection rates. So we think we've got that mix right. We will not increase council tax rates on the basis of arrears, however. We will continue to try and pursue that money. Even after the end of that 6-year period, if somebody does pop up, then we will still pursue them for money. Councillor Williams, yeah, the LGA works phenomenally well across party on this matter. I am a member of the business rate retention task and finish group, which is one of the most intensely boring things I've ever been involved in, but hugely important. Our submission to the government around the spending review and the fair funding formula is comprehensive and has been discussed at LGA executive meetings for the past, feels like 18 months, might not actually be that long, and I look forward to that work being continued. Councillor Galley and Councillor Williams, I have to say our capital projects by and large do run on time and to budget. All of our recent highway schemes have, with the exception of the tramway up Talbot Road. And the issue with the tramway up Talbot Road is hardly a secret. Walk up Talbot Road and there is something which is impeding the tramway being finished. And it's called Wilkinson's. There is little, I mean, short of burrowing through it, which I understand the current owners wouldn't be keen about, there's really not much we can do about that. So to suggest that there is an overall issue with capital projects overrunning or overrunning budget, I'm afraid simply isn't the case. We will be moving ahead on the tramway, but we do need to move Wilkinson's, and there's a number of things going on in the background to resolve that situation. That essentially is around the ownership of the Hounds Hill Centre and our ability to do business with the people that own it at the moment. Watch this space. Councillor Williams, you keep trying this, and I'm not going to fall for it. The ride hasn't been built yet. You don't know how big it's going to be. I don't know how big it's going to be. Nobody knows what the technology is going to be used for. What I will tell you is it will be the first flying theatre in the United Kingdom, and I believe it will be very, very, very popular. There is an emerging narrative from certain opposition parties which suggests that things aren't going to time. You know, things are delayed, things are slow. Quite simply isn't true. All of the landmarks, all of the dates that we've set out, which basically says that that site will be complete within a decade. That site will be complete within a decade. Coming back here every 3 months and saying, why has nothing happened yet? Doesn't equate to there being a delay. We are, and in answer to specifically Councillor Williams' final point about the land transaction, we are in the final stages of negotiations about a land transaction, which may or may not be a sale of land. You'll just have to wait and see. It's currently, what am I going to say? It's commercially confidential, absolutely. Councillor Galley, my favourite words and your least favourite. Councillor Galley, I'm glad you're so excited about the fibre optic cable. Sir?
It's very exciting.
Yes, it's very exciting. I'm doing my best to understand it, if I'm honest. And yes, we will market it in the way that you suggest. And seeing as yourself and Councillor Williams are obviously very interested in this, I didn't know any of the stuff about Virgin and microwaves. It sounds like the start of a terrible joke. But you're more than welcome to come and talk to me and try and explain a bit more about it to me if you wish. Councillor Williams, yes, I'm sure we can get a directory of businesses that are on the Enterprise Centre. It must exist somewhere. We'll find out where it is and we'll get it to all members. The airport is all about diversification, and renewable energy is going to play a large part in that. There may or may not be helicopters flying to rigs in 9 years' time. But I've said very gently to Councillor Williams, he and some of his colleagues keep trying to define the success of the airport as being about aeroplanes, and I keep resisting that. Because when we bought the airport back, we made it very clear that this wasn't about bringing large-scale passenger aircraft back to Blackpool Airport. The focus of our attention is on business rate growth and on the enterprise zone. So no matter how many times he and his colleagues ask me about big aeroplanes, they're still not going to get them. Councillor Galley, your question was about Mr Hawking moving from the directorate to the new company. Funnily enough, in about January of this year, I asked our HR department to start succession planning in all of our directorates, because I can see, and I'm sure others can see, as you look around at some of our senior management teams, there's a lot of people in their 50s, and we've got to start thinking about who will replace them. I met with Linda Dutton, our head of HR, last week, and she's updated me on where we've got to with that. So that is an ongoing process. Councillor Mrs Callow, the early years health visiting model. We have met with a tiny bit of resistance from some parents. As a social worker, I would have been quite satisfied with a tiny little bit of resistance from some parents. We tended to get a lot worse than that. I would like to reassure you, though, that the system is designed around transient families, and it's designed around the sort of lives that families in Blackpool tend to lead. So I don't think, I think, if anything, we're much more likely to get to grips with those highly transient families now under this model, and I think some of the changes that we're going to be making to our children's centre provision, hopefully over the next few weeks, will strengthen that. Councillor Collett, I met the chairman of the hospital trust a few weeks ago. I meet regularly with the chair of the CCG, and I met with the new chief executive of Lancashire Care Foundation Trust a couple of weeks ago when they presented to all of the Lancashire leaders in Preston. We absolutely do, through you, Lady Mayor, need to make sure that we work wherever we can with our colleagues in the NHS. I don't think I'm breaking any state secrets when I say they're not always the easiest people to deal with. They have certain ways of working, and frankly, as do councils, but there is much more joint working now than I've ever seen in my career thus far. A lot of that is driven by financial necessity, I'm afraid. But Arif does a fantastic job at bringing all of this together, but we will continue to do so. Councillor Mrs Callow, I was walking along the promenade about 10 days ago. I was just going for a drink at the beach house, and I said to my friend, I said, look at the state of the Clifton Hotel. I must get on to Neil before Maxine asks me about it at the next council meeting. No, funnily enough, somebody, one of our officers has met with them today, partly because I said, she's going to ask me about this at the council meeting, what am I going to say? And I'm afraid we're in a bit of a Mexican standoff at the moment, to be frank. They don't want to spend the money that needs to be spent. There are certain consequences for the council if we seek to enforce on that company. And it looks like we're going to have to get around the table with them again and potentially with the franchisee. The issue apparently is that they can't let the ground floor, which used to be a nightclub. Well, to my mind, you're not going to be able to let the ground floor of that building while it's in the state that it's in at the moment. If you do it up, there's half a chance of letting it. I do hope that once the development on the former Yates' site is complete, which incidentally will stop our windows being as mucky as they are at the moment, which is part of the problem, that plonking 150 bedrooms here and all of the people and all of the footfall that will provide will make the ground floor of that space somewhat more palatable to a developer. But it's going to be a long road, and we rely very heavily, and the legislation relies very heavily on businesses cooperating with local authorities, and at the moment we're not getting much in the way of cooperation, I have to say. But we will keep pursuing it doggedly. I will get someone to go and meet with the people at the Norbrett Castle and see what we can do about the situation there. Councillor Williams, yeah, nearby building works, both the tramway and the Premier Inn are creating a considerable dust. I take your point about the town hall. Bits of it could do with the liquor paint. I have to say, you know, I've seen the structural surveys of the town hall, and there is a bit of the mayor's parlour that I won't stand in, just in case. It's an old building, and it's constantly going to need upkeep. But I'll get somebody to have a look at it and see what we can do. I understand how important it is to people. Just on the homelessness point, yeah, I mean, I think we've deferred our meeting rather than cancelled it. More than happy to have that meeting with you at your convenience. Members may have noted that I co-chaired the Local Government Information Unit report into homelessness that was published just over a week ago. I point people in the direction of the recommendations to government that we've made in there, which I think will make a big impact, because you're absolutely right. People beg on the streets and people sleep out for a wide variety of different reasons. One of the points that we made in the LGIU report, however, is that for every 2 people that we see sleeping on the street, there are another 98 in temporary accommodation or hostel accommodation. So it's so much more than rough sleeping, although that's a very important part of the picture. So look, continue to work with you on that. Councillor Robertson, you're welcome. I'm glad you accepted the role, and I'm glad you're enjoying it. I look forward to seeing you hopefully at the Arboretum on Friday and at the Cenotaph on Sunday, and I'm sure all members will take a fresh look at the rest of the week's events and will attend wherever they can. With that, thank you very much, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Okay, on to Place and Tourism. Councillor Campbell, to present your report.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Just have one thing that I'd like to update members with in my report, and it's actually for Councillor Mrs Callow, who asked a question the other night there at the scrutiny that I could not answer, so I found out the answer for you. So Troutbeck Crescent, you asked if there was going to be some bungalows or such like there for older people, given our ageing population, and I can tell you, as part of the plans, there will be 9 dormer bungalows built as part of that development. So with that, Lady Mayor, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Okay, any questions on page 15? Page 16? Councillor Stansfield.
Thank you very much, Lady Mayor. I'd like to refer to the first 2 sections on page 16 with the new homes for Hoyle House, but mainly the Troutbeck Crescent and the Foxhall Village, both of which went through the planning committee very recently. Unfortunately, they are both our developments, and I was very disappointed to see that in this day and age where we have green strategies and blue strategies, and we all talk about carbon footprints, that there is nothing on either of the developments for solar energy or any other sort of carbon footprint reduction or charging points for electric vehicles, anything like that that's incorporated into them. I wondered if we can actually start and look at things like this for our future developments, because if we are going to be the premier town in all aspects, we need to lead the way on energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stansfield. Councillor Williams.
Lady Mayor, I welcome new houses and I welcome the development and the benefits that they bring to the town. But what does concern me is that we seem to be building housing estates instead of building communities. All the houses that we're building at the moment, including those over on Grange Park, we're still putting a strain on all our health services, our emergency services, etc., etc. And it's all well and good building these houses and putting people there, but we're not actually helping with social isolation. And we need to start building that community sense within the properties that we're developing. And one of the things which has been drawn out of my report tonight, my motion, was about sprinkler systems. For reasons beyond my control and the leader's control, that's going to be deferred to another meeting till we get more information. But I do think we should consider the health services, the dentists, the schools, etc., 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 and all our new developments. And if we don't start building communities, we're not doing the job right.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any comments or questions on page 16? No. Page 17? Page 18? Councillor Clapham? Oh, sorry. You weren't quick enough, were you?
Madam
No. That's a fiver in the box, that, Councillor Clapham.
Oh dear. The only thing on the series of contracts that we've been given, which is absolutely fantastic. I've never seen as many. Obviously, it's gone through the electoral period, etc., hence the quantity. But the one that I looked at that interests me is the Municipal Buildings Job Centre plus Security. And I then went to look at the company who have been awarded the contract, which is £800,000, which obviously caught my attention. Now, this company, Amulet, seems to be in two branches. One is they are extensive in terms of cleaning, with contracts at the Royal Ballet, certain railway stations, obviously cherry picking and finding good contracts for their company. Are they just coming into Blackpool on the security arm of their business, or is it a cleaning contract? Because they are big in both areas. And the thought that came to my mind, which may be worth thinking about, is if it is either security or if it is cleaning, why don't we, because we are keen on setting up companies, branch out and go into that sort of business? If there are contracts there worth £800,000, just on the one item, if it was security, for instance, we have security that go around the parks, look at schools and all different things in the borough to keep our properties safe. It could be an area of growth and also produce employment locally. It was just a thought, and that stood out a mile out of the contract. And I congratulate you on the detail that you've given me and our group. It's excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clapham. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I want to echo Councillor Clapham's comments there to the Deputy Leader on the layout and the format of the purchasing process in terms of who's doing what and where they're from and the amounts and so on. It's really, really good. Especially the end column, number of bidders within an FY postcode. And obviously the most obvious reason why we're so interested in that particular column is the way that we use our own purchasing to fuel and nurture the Fylde economy and the Lancashire wider economy. Now, I know there are all sorts of state aid restrictions around who we can offer contracts to and the purchasing methodologies that we have to follow, which isn't just a case of saying we'll give it to the team just down the road. But what I was quite interested in was obviously the number of zeros in the bidders, number of bidders section, some of which I thought would have been higher for some of those industries. Some, obviously, we had no one in the file that could do that work. Clearly, it would be a zero. So I wondered where there are no restrictions about who can bid for a contract. Anyone can bid. If that should be potentially a target area for our economic development team in terms of how we're growing the filed economy. And we talk a lot about the Preston model. If this could be our version of a Blackpool model in terms of that particular target.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I presume we're on page 19, if not, it's
Page 18, love.
Page 18. I do beg your pardon. My question was for page 19.
Okay. On page 18, any more comments or questions? No. Councillor Williams, you can stand back up again. Page 19.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. It was about the football club sponsorship, which I welcome. I think it's great. I think it's good for the council that we're doing this. Could the portfolio holder tell us how much this has actually cost us? And why we had to have the ceremony at the top of the tower and not in the ground itself, which I think would have been more appropriate. More people could have come. I hope it's not commercially confidential. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Brooks?
Yes, thank you, Lady Mayor. I must confess, before rising today, I did have a worried conversation with Democratic Services about whether or not I should declare a personal interest in this item of the agenda. As a season ticket holder and supporter of Blackpool Football Club for over 40 years. And I have to say that never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that a maiden speech to this council would be to welcome the news that this council is actually sponsoring our community football team. And I echo Mr Williams' comments that it is a tremendous step forward for this council. Having travelled the length and breadth of England and indeed Europe, wearing various tangerine shirts, sadly only on holidays in Europe so far, I'm well aware of the high regard that Blackpool Football Club supporters are held throughout the country. The passion and enthusiasm that they show is second to none, and to think that the sea of tangerine that's often seen on television and around town centres throughout England will now include the Visit Blackpool logo and publicise the Get Vocal campaign is excellent news. The excellent news is only added to by the even more excellent news that the club now have a new owner and are no longer in the hands of administrators. The even better news is that Simon Sadler, the new owner, is a lifelong Blackpool fan and a local lad made good. It seems like a fairy story, if I'm honest. Having witnessed firsthand over the last few years the triumphs made over adversity by the players and staff alike, in spite of the off-field difficulties, Blackpool supporters can have nothing but optimism for the coming season. And I'm sure that everyone here tonight will welcome the developments at Bloomfield Road and will join with me in extending good wishes to Terry McPhillips and the team and the new owner for a successful season and ongoing success beyond. I look forward to once again seeing children in the town wearing tangerine shirts in the local parks and playgrounds and not simply following the bigger and more fashionable clubs. Football clubs are at the heart of our communities. The fact that our council has taken the bold step of securing a sponsorship deal with our community team is to the credit of all concerned. Long may the relationship continue. Long may we see Blackpool football fans being ambassadors for their town as they travel across the country.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Any other questions or comments on page 19? Councillor Clapham.
Lady Mayor. I've had my free go, you see.
You've had your free one. You don't get any more.
It's on the same item, actually. Without going into the cost of the sponsorship, which I have no idea, but I certainly hope it isn't at the same sort of level of Premiership shirt sponsorships, which are colossal in terms of expense. But one thing in the write-up which actually drops onto the top second line in page 20 is the fact that the logo Visit Blackpool features on the front of the new Tangerine home shirt. Well, why isn't it going to appear on the away shirts as well? unless the leader of the council knows something different, because we want people, when they're watching their home team playing our team away, to be reminded that they still need to visit Blackpool, and when they get the draw against us on our ground, this will be a must-visit match or weekend, which will be good for the club and good for the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clapham. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell's perfectly capable of answering questions on her own, but I just wanted to prove to Councillor Clapham that I do ask questions about these things. To support everything that Councillor Brooks has said, I asked exactly the same question, only to be reminded by the Chief Executive that, of course, a football club only wears its away strip when its home strip clashes with the people that they're playing. And when you regularly play in a tangerine shirt, apparently that situation doesn't arise very often. Unless they're playing Holland, which is a set of circumstances that it's quite hard to envisage. So yeah, that's the reason why it is the way it is.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Page 20. Councillor Miss Callow.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Regarding the Inner Wheel Conference, which we've attracted to Blackpool with 2,000 delegates, I say congratulations to everybody involved in this. I was many years ago a member of the Inner Wheel, and I do know that when they have a conference, it's not just the ladies that come. They bring their husbands as well, or their partners, and then they will be so impressed with what Blackpool has got to offer that could perhaps open the door for things like Rotary International, where you get delegates from all over the world. So to get this Inner Wheel Conference really is absolutely wonderful. And when I went to the last one, they have some quite big celebrities there speaking. They had the likes of Esther Ranson and some other people in that league. So it really is a real feather in the cap for Blackpool. Congratulations to everybody who worked hard to get it. And I just hope we can build on it and get the Rotarians themselves, and in particular Rotary International, to come and see our new conference centre and what this wonderful town has got to offer. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Callow. And if it helps, and I'll abuse my right as chair of this meeting, I'm sure Mr. Williams will be very pleased to hear that as the MD of the Winter Gardens, and I do know he's working very hard to reach some of those people that you've just mentioned. Any other comments or questions on page 20? Okay, page 21. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Within the Quality Corridors section, can I refer to Councillor Campbell states that she is particularly looking forward to the planting of more trees, and that the 10 planted on Cookson Street had received some positive feedback. Okay, with that in mind, Councillor Cox were at a meeting, and a senior council officer informed myself and Councillor Cox that these trees cost a total of £10,000 each. Can Councillor Campbell confirm this figure, and does she think that £100,000 spent on trees on Cookson Street, given all the cuts and the austerity, is value for money? Can I also ask, if this is true, and she could come back with a figure today, if she thinks the people who praised these trees would have the same view? My second question on page 21, in regards to transforming service, I think we can all welcome the extra funding from central government, and I'd like to praise the successful bid on acquiring the £250,000. Can I ask Councillor Campbell if she would inform the members where this additional emergency night shelter will be, and more importantly, when does she perceive a go-live date? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. It was a question or a note as regards to the section on page 21 about parks and the volunteering groups and so on that are contributing to the maintenance of the parks in the town. I had the pleasure last week, Lady Mayor, of speaking at an NHS conference about the role that parks can play in the way volunteers not only deliver a service but actually feel very beneficial in terms of their mental health through the delivery of green spaces. And what I picked up, there's a real appetite in the NHS for developing and this is the Blackpool NHS, to develop a social prescription model in terms of working with the community to be giving them options that deal with isolation, loneliness, depression, low-level depression, and some of the things that play themselves out eventually at A&E, where they are clearly struggling through volume. So what I wanted to suggest, if possible, Lady Mayor, if there could be some way that we could support our Parks Department in the way we deliver, in partnership with the NHS, a town-wide social prescription model where GPs, occupational health workers are directly referring into some of these groups, some of the patients that present themselves with some of the conditions that I mentioned, and deliver it in such a way that through the NHS we can actually measure targets around the amount of time people are on antidepressants and so on, so we can actually start to clearly identify the economic value of our assets as a council, because I generally believe, Lady Mayor, that the NHS has never needed local government more than it does at the moment, which is a great thing for ourselves, the NHS, and most of all, the people of Blackpool.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Clapham.
Thank you very much. Same item, actually. The fact that we've got so many groups of friends that do spend their time managing the parks is just fantastic. They do an excellent job, and they do need to be congratulated. Our local park, which is Cavendish Road Park, we've had a meeting just recently with our new councillor, Wilshaw, at the back, our Paul, and it was extremely interesting, but there is one issue on that park, and it's a hole in the roof of the pavilion. The officers went away, it's nearly 2 months ago now, and they were going to come back and give us a report on the roof and where we were going to go, whether it means that we really may need it is a little bit of a choker for people who volunteer, take time apart from planting the plants and the flowers and looking after the place, to have a meeting and get nothing in terms of feedback back from the officers. I think that's a pretty poor show. I know with a lot less officers than we used to have, I appreciate the problems, but I'm sure we could get the answers in a little bit quicker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Clapham. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I'm going back to my colleague, Councillor Walsh's discussion about trees. I heard that it was £10,000 a tree as well, which really quite stunned me, because Councillor Gallion and I have planted more than 100 trees in Ankersholm, and we haven't spent the price of one of these trees. So I'm just curious as to where the cost comes from. The other thing I'm curious about is, I read today that we're actually cutting down 5 trees in the town centre. 1 cherry, 2 sycamores, 1 cypress and 1 hawthorn. It didn't say in the article whether they were diseased or they were in the way of any development. Could the portfolio holder please clarify that? Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Callow.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. For a number of years, Councillor Peter Callow and I have been trying to green up Norbrec, and we've had a scheme where we've asked the residents if they would like a tree in their grass verge, and these trees cost approximately £350 each. And many residents have been disappointed, particularly on Norbrec Road, where they can't have a tree on the grass verge because of the utilities underneath. But I'm just thinking about it. I'm wondering, could we look at the possibility of perhaps planting some bushes, something that where the roots won't spread as far? It's just an idea, because you know we are quite willing to use our ward funding to try to green up the area, and many residents, as I've said, are very disappointed that they can't have one in their grass verge. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Danny Scott.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. A lot of words have been spoken about volunteering, and it's excellent that it is in a growth industry in Blackpool. It's difficult to see how some of the parks would be as splendid as they are without these volunteers. And I'm absolutely delighted, and I'd like to thank Sainsbury's in particular on their 150th anniversary, who have committed themselves to 150 days of community participation, and we are very fortunate in Jubilee Gardens, with the Friends of Jubilee Gardens, that they have selected us as a group to work with, and we will be having volunteers in our gardens from now on till October. And I was down there with my wife today, Councillor Michelle Scott, and we had 20 volunteers turn up for the first day with a presentation, a little talk from the managers, etc. And it was an absolute honour to be there to see the work that is going on in Blackpool and the commitment given by Sainsbury's. So I just want to take this opportunity to thank Sainsbury's for what they're doing for Blackpool. The other thing I wanted to say was, before I sit down, it's not really a question, it's a thank you to yourself for the title of Lady Mayor. For someone so young, in this day of gender sensitivity, I'm absolutely delighted you've decided to call yourself Lady Mayor. Well done.
Thank you very much. I won't tell you the conversation I had with Liz Wood, because I think she nearly had an embolism. Any more questions on page 21 or comments, please? Page 22. Okay, Councillor Clapham.
Thank you very much, Lady Mayor. It's on the Keep Blackpool Tidy campaign, and specifically on the new public space protection order on the west side of the tram tracks. The fact that we are now including no glass on the beaches order. Very much in favour of that. Long time waiting for it, but there are so many accidents with broken glass on the beaches. Could I ask whether this actually extends to the grassed areas at the top, which is to the west of the tram track? And if so, could we further extend it to no cans? Because when they're left on the beach and they go up and down and they corrode, they can cause an awful lot of problems, and the sand partially buries them, leaves jagged edges, and you can get some very nasty cuts. And it would be the same on the cliff tops, especially when the mowers come along. If there is glass there or cans, the mowers literally shred it, and it is a problem for humans, children, and obviously animals, because they stand on, come out, get cut. It is a problem. So I welcome it. Just the addition that I suggest would make it even safer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clapham. Councillor Mrs Callow.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. It's on the last paragraph here about fixed penalty fines. I do welcome this, but I wonder how the collection rate is coming along. I don't want to pour cold water on it, but as a magistrate, I know that when people are fined in court, 9 times out of 10, if they're on benefits, they'll pay it £2 a week. That's if they actually pay it. And it probably costs an awful lot of money in trying to recover these fines. You know, it is a good idea. Perhaps it will deter some people, but I just wondered how the collection of these fines is going and what we're going to do to ensure that we actually get the money off these people, because it's a disgrace what they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Any other questions, comments? Page 22. Not there yet. Calm down. Calm down. Okay, no more general questions. Go on, Councillor Galley, I'll let you.
Thank you very much, Lady Mayor. It's very kind, very kind. It was just a follow-up to the scrutiny that the Deputy Leader attended on Thursday, where he had a very interesting and quite enjoyed it conversation around marketing strategies and so on. Since that scrutiny meeting, Lady Mayor, it was announced yesterday, or the day before, some really good news I thought for Blackpool, which was that Grand Central have confirmed that they will be operating 5 trains a day, potentially 6 trains a day, from London to Blackpool, giving us potentially 11 trains a day from London and back, which is huge. And anybody that's been to the North East will tell you about the level of pricing strategies that Grand Central use and how effective that is for reaching out to different types of markets to travel in directly between the North and London, or the North East and London. So my question really is, will we develop a marketing strategy in partnership with Grand Central and whoever replaces Virgin to deliver a marketing plan that reaches out to different types of customers that potentially haven't visited Blackpool before in different ways, and really the partnership work really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I did read somewhere recently that pollution, one of the biggest problems, was cigarette ends, cigarette butts. Evidently, they're very difficult to burn, but if anyone who has smoked in the past, as I did some 30 years ago, and lit the wrong end of a cigarette, you'll know how toxic a filter tip smells. It just saddens me every time I walk past Customer First, the mess on the pavement down there. I'm sure we've all seen it. There must be something we can do about that, and I don't know whether it's putting more bins there or putting no smoking signs up or what we'll do to cure it, but it's an awful mess. It really needs looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other general questions? Councillor Danny Scott.
Just to emphasise what Councillor Williams just said. I was downtown just the other day with Councillor Michelle Scott, and we had one of our lads working in town with a litter picker. And the areas I was working, I could not count the cigarette butts. I've got no idea how you're going to pick all those little bits up. I'm wondering if we could look at some simple technology that could just hoover things up like cigarette butts. I have no idea what you come up with, but perhaps to make their job a little bit easier and more effective and more efficient, perhaps a few pounds spent on a machine that could cover that job would do the trick.
Okay, councillors, just before I move on, I'm going to have to ask if we can add a 2-minute extension onto this part of the agenda, because we've now reached our 25 minutes. So all those in favour of adding a 2-minute extension, please raise your hands. Thank you very much. We'll do that then. Any other general questions on this particular portfolio? No? Okay, Councillor Campbell. Quick.
Thank you very much, Lady Mayor. First of all, Councillor Stansfield, the new houses, and yeah, the green and blue strategy is now coming into my portfolio, if you will. So yeah, I'm very disappointed in that as well, and I will make sure that I ask officers why that's not happened and make sure that it happens in the future. That really is the way, solar power and, you know, electric charging points. We want everyone to give up their petrol cars, so we need to make sure we give them the facilities to do so. Councillor Williams, housing estates, putting a strain on services. No, I completely agree. But unfortunately, we're obliged by local plan, as you know, by the government, to build a certain amount of houses every year. And that is difficult. We've got very little land. And so where we do have to build, say, in my ward, so in Park Ward, the idea that those houses won't become part of the community, you know, that's not true. They really will truly integrate into the community. We've got fantastic facilities up there and they will be welcomed with open arms. But I think the problem that we have, that developers, they're loath to pay Section 106 monies. They always say, well, this isn't viable, we can't do this, so you need to knock some money off. We've only got to look at some of the developments that have happened on the edge of town to know that's right. We lost a lot of money that way. And that money is used to build roads and health centres and schools and things like that. So there's a little bit of blame everywhere, I think. But as I say, we are obliged to do it. For me, I wouldn't be building as many houses. I think you're right. But we have to, otherwise we'd get into trouble. Councillor Clapham, Amulet. I think they're just security, but I don't know. Don't think it's cleaning. Bit of an operational question. I don't really know much about it. But if you want us to create a new company, we're the administration to do it. That's no problem. We'll have a look into it. Councillor Galley, the layout of the contracts. Yeah, it looks quite good, doesn't it? Did it all myself. Number of zeros in the bidders. Yeah, I think it could be a target for our economy team. But like you say, I think sometimes we're never going to get anyone with an FY postcode bidding for certain things, but I'm happy for them to have a look at it if you would like me to. Councillor Williams, football club sponsorship. We've not officially signed the contract yet, so I can't tell you how much. Commercially confidential. Absolutely, it's a word of the week. Why was it in the Tower? I didn't pick the venue myself. I did attend it, and I believe I was on Sky Sports News, not looking very glamorous, but I was on. I think it could be because we wanted the glamorous shot of obviously the piers and being on in the Tower, and you know, something for the cameras. But also, the club was still in administration at that point, so I don't think we could have done it at the ground. Councillor Brooks, completely echo your sentiments, even though I read it earlier. It's fabulous. Councillor Clapham, visit Blackpool on the home shorts. Well, yeah, obviously the leader did tell you about that, but I did speak about the away shirt being the Get Vocal campaign, and there is a reason for that. I believe it was Arif who told me about it. So when you go to a football club, not being horrible here, but they're all usually of a certain age, yeah, usually male, not always. And if they see something like that on the front of a shirt, they're more likely to go, oh, what's that about? And it's about trying to appeal to that demographic, because the Get Vocal campaign is about talking about your mental health and things like that. So that is the reason behind that on the shirts there. Councillor Mrs. I've put you down Mrs. Clapham, I'm terribly sorry. I got my C's mixed up there. The Inner Wheel Conference, yes, really pleased about that. Obviously pleased about any conference that wants to come to Blackpool, but I believe that is a great one. And the leader has told me to tell you that his mother's in Inner Wheel, so, you know, I would just like to say, I probably never will be. I don't think it appealed to me. Councillor Walsh, trees, yeah, those trees were incredibly expensive, but there is a reason for that. So they are called street scene trees. If you Google them, there's different types of street scene trees, and they were picked because they will withstand the elements in Blackpool. So your pollution, your wind, your rain. They're also, you may have noticed, there was an awful lot of digging going on. I thought they were going to Australia at one point, and that's because they've put in a special system which holds the roots of the trees in, so it saves them going into the roadway. So that part itself is very expensive. I don't have the exact figure, but if you would like it, I can find out for you. We do plan on planting more trees. I'd like to see lots. You either love a tree or you hate a tree. I love trees. So I can get the prices for you, though. And I would just say that someone in your area, in Highfield, on Highfield Road, wants me to plant trees there. So we'll get you some for there as well. Councillor Galley, social prescription model. I think that's a great idea, yeah. And I'm happy to speak to the Cabinet member about moving that forward. Councillor Clapham, Cavendish Road Park, hole in the roof. You've got war budget. You could spend some of that on it. Would it? Ah, right, okay. I'll ask the portfolio holder to speak to officers and get you an update on that. Councillor William, trees again. I don't know about the cutting down of trees. I'm assuming they only ever cut down trees if there's something wrong with them, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, but we will certainly find out for you. But as I say, we're planting more. Councillor Mrs. Callow, more trees. Bushes, yes. I will ask an officer to contact you about that as well, because I think that's a great idea. A bit of greenery without having all the roots, yeah. Councillor Danny Scott, volunteering, Jubilee Gardens, yes, I was actually invited to that myself today, but I couldn't make it. But I am going to be meeting very soon with the manager of Sainsbury's, Julia, to chat through how if I can help in any way with what they're actually doing. It's fantastic that you've got so many people there. Councillor Clapham, PSPO, yeah, no glass west of the tram tracks. I'm not sure about no cans. I get what you're saying, but I'm not. We'd probably have to go back and consult about that. It was a very lengthy consultation. But if it's still problematic, when it comes up for renewal, we'll certainly look at it. I did actually speak with officers yesterday about how we will advertise the PSPO on that side. It's incredibly hard. There's not much in the way of street furniture, so we're at the moment pricing up some big boards so it'll have all the information on it near the steps, all the steps. And you may have seen these ones going up all over town. Got them to take pictures of them for me. So these are the ones about begging and, you know, keeping dogs on leads, etc. Have you got yours in your park yet? I'll see you outside. But basically, when it comes to cans, people need to use the numerous bins we have in Blackpool. And if the bin's full, take it to the next one or take it home with you. Councillor Mrs. Callow, I don't know the collection rate of FPNs, but I'll ask Jez Evans to let you know what it is at the moment. They are, I wouldn't say enjoying that new power, but possibly enjoying that new power of being able to find the registered keeper of the vehicle. We did have one before that power who noticed a lady throwing something out on the prom, and he actually followed her all the way home and gave her an FPN. So they're very, very passionate, these people. Councillor Galley, marketing strategy, yes, we will develop a plan with the new trains. That's great, great news. Yes, certainly will. And Councillor Williams, cigarette ends, it is very bad out there. I know there's a couple of bins. Part of it is just a little bit of laziness. But I think you're right. We need something better than a litter picker. One might suggest a brush. So I will speak to the cleansing team and see if we can help in any way. Well, I'm not sure if we can do that. But okay. And that's it from me. Thank you, Lady Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, so on behalf of Councillor Kane, I believe Councillor Blackburn, you're going to present this report and try and answer any questions that you are able to.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I asked Councillor Kane not to be here tonight. A member of his family is unwell. I'm happy to present his very extensive report and answer as many questions as I am able. Just 2 points, if I may, Lady Mayor. First of all, to give people a general update on the situation with the Commissioner, who was sent in by the DFE following our poor Ofsted inspection towards the end of last year. We've worked very closely with the Commissioner now for a period of just over 3 months. I'm not at liberty to share the Commissioner's views with this meeting. However, I do hope that an announcement about the future of children's services will be made, a decision will be made by the Secretary of State before Parliament enters recess, which I think is the 23rd of July. But I'm pleased with the work that's gone on thus far, and I thank members of the opposition, firstly Councillor Williams and Councillor Clapham, who were members of the Children's Improvement Board, now replaced by Councillor Mrs Scott and Councillor Scott himself, for their endeavours in this. It's encouraging to see everybody working together. So I'd like to thank everybody, and everybody, of course, on scrutiny who is working to help resolve this issue as well. The only other thing I'd like to highlight on pages 26 to 27, we talk about Head Start, young people paving their way to a brighter future. I tend not to watch the news on the television because I find it makes me shout at the television. But I did happen to see the North West News about 10 days ago when they covered, the BBC North West News covered the resilience pathway. I know you were there, Lady Mayor, when the young people had Head Start opened it. And I emailed Pauline Wigglesworth when I came into the office the following morning to say that I was genuinely touched at how marvellous those young people were and how well they came across on the television. It was incredible to see the work that they were doing. As luck would have it, that night, the Young People Steering Group were meeting in Committee Room B, so I was able to go along and speak to them. An absolutely marvellous group of young people. They've set up their own anti-bullying charter mark, which they're taking to schools and getting schools to assess themselves against a bronze, silver and gold standard. They're running a campaign about raising the minimum wage for young people. absolutely superb. So if anybody gets an opportunity to do anything with the Head Start people, I really do recommend it, because the young people are absolutely inspiring and filled me with a huge sense of confidence about the future of the town. With that, I present the report, Lady Mayor, and will be happy to try and answer any questions I can.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blackburn. Funnily enough, the Head Start young people were meeting in this building this evening. I popped my head into Committee Room B earlier because they were in there, and they resemble a little bit of Blackpool People's Council, if Councillor Blackburn remembers that. It's a long time ago, you're telling me. I was 17 when I left there. Is there any questions on page 23? No. Page 24. Page 25. Page 26. Page 27. Page 27. Okay, Councillor Clapham. We'll take it as page 27, shall we?
It's really to do with the Blackpool Opportunity Area Programme. Just to say that I do support fully priorities 1, 2 and 3. And I know that the work that goes on at the college I mentioned earlier, Blackpool Sixth Form College, is just amazing in this area. And it is really essential to support young people to reach their full potential. And this priority 3 is helping people who are just struggling, who need that extra push just at that time, so that they are capable of going forward to post-16 education. If they can get in there and then be successful with the support of our 2 main colleges in Blackpool, then they've got a passport for life. So priority 3, certainly in my life, is critical, but 1, 2 and 3 are critical to the whole of our children population. And I really do welcome it with open arms.
Thank you, Councillor Clapham. Any more on page 27? Page 28? General questions? Councillor Williams?
Not just necessarily a general question, Lady Mayor, but an observation. We do send Councillor Kane our very best wishes and hope that a member of his family gets well soon. I'm not so sure whether it's Councillor Campbell or Councillor Kane that deals with sport anymore. It's you. Well, it sort of crosses over. I'd just like to say I've been watching the ladies' football tournament, and I think it's been brilliant, absolutely fantastic. And I wish England the very best. I think they play tonight, if I'm not mistaken. Tomorrow. Well, best of luck to them. But I do think, has this given an incentive to some of the young ladies in Blackpool? And can we start looking at more ladies' teams of all ages? I mean, we're doing a lot, Paul's doing a lot in Ankerzone Park. We've now got a team together, which are playing down at Poolfoot Farm. And I'd like to see more young girls involved in this sport, because I hope that England and the rest of the world teams we've seen who've played so brilliantly should be an inspiration to them. I'm just hoping the portfolio holder can help drive that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other general questions? No? Okay. Councillor Blackburn?
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Councillor Clapham, the Opportunity Area Programme, I absolutely agree. It's a fantastic scheme. It was one of these that the Secretary of State, and I think we're now at least 2 Secretaries of State ago, we got a phone call from the civil servants in the morning to say the Secretary of State's going to announce these opportunity areas, and you are one. Well, oh, right. What is it? I said, we don't know. We don't know, but what it's become, I think, is absolutely superb. It's tailored precisely to Blackpool, and it addresses those issues, and you pick out in particular the issues around transition that we know we've got an issue with here. We know that children, when they leave our primary schools, are doing round about the national average. We don't understand, and we still don't properly understand what happens then to that appears to lower the performance when they start at high school. But this is helping us to get under the skin of that. You may be pleased to know that myself and the Chief Executive and a couple of others have been invited to a meeting with the Secretary of State for Education a week on Monday down at the DFE to review what's happened so far, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and what we can do differently in the future. And I will certainly be encouraging them if they can. I think at the moment it's probably going to be difficult to extract a commitment from any Secretary of State to consider extending the project and to putting more resource into it, because I think this is exactly the right sort of thing to do. And I have my youngest daughter, Sky, our youngest daughter, Sky, is transitioning from primary school to high school this summer, and our eldest daughter, Regan, is transitioning from high school to sixth form. So I have a vested interest in making sure that this all goes swimmingly. Councillor Williams, I also have been watching the Women's World Cup, and it's one of the best things I've ever seen. They're absolutely amazing. If the standard of men's football in this country was anything like that, we'd be doing an awful lot better. The portfolio holder was sitting nodding vigorously as you were talking. Our youngest daughter, Sky, has just started playing football at school. So yes, I think we will do as much as we can to encourage the formation of more girls and women's teams in the town, because I think this is a real opportunity. I think the Women's World Cup has really grabbed people's attention. I can remember going to Bloomfield Road, I think it was in 2004 or 2006, when the Women's European Cup was held in this country. I think there was about 400 of us kicking around in Bloomfield Road watching that. To see large stadia in France absolutely packed, I think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Okay, so moving on to item 5, report of the Independent Remuneration Panel. Councillor Blackburn, I believe you're moving this particular motion.
Yeah, move the recommendations, Lady Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Campbell, are you seconding?
Formally second, Lady Mayor, sorry.
Oh, nearly.
Can I just say how delighted I am to see the policy in respect to maternity, paternity and adoption pay in this, given my notice of motion to Council. Very pleased to see that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. Okay, any other councillors wish to speak on this particular item? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I just wanted the leader to say remuneration because he has as much problem with it as I do.
Go on, I dare you. Go on.
Happy to move the report of the Remuneration Panel.
There we go. Okay, thank you very much. I'll take that as your right of reply, Councillor Blackburn. Can we please vote on the motion? All those in favour? Wonderful. I think that was a unanimous vote. How lovely. Oh, we like those. Okay, moving on to the appointments of position. Again, Councillor Blackburn, I believe you're moving this particular recommendation.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Perhaps it would be beneficial to the Chamber to understand that the reason why this has come back only one meeting after we appointed the committees in the first place is because I made a mistake. I put the wrong person in this job. I gave somebody 2 vice chairmanships by accident. So my apologies that we're having to do it again, but I got it wrong. But everything else is right, I've checked.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Campbell, are you seconding?
Formally second, Lady Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the councillors wish to speak on this? No, straight to the vote. Those all in favour? Unanimous. Wonderful. I wonder if we can carry some of this on in the next particular agenda items. I doubt it, but here we go. Let's give it a whirl. Okay, so in terms of the notices of motion, the fixed integral sprinkler system, I believe, Councillor Williams, you've actually withdrawn that particular motion to bring it back at a later date. Fantastic, so we don't have to worry about that one this evening. The next one on the agenda is free personal care for the elderly, and I believe it's Councillor Mitchell to move.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. This motion affects everybody in this chamber. People are living longer. We can no longer designate old age as a brief period before death. The elderly and the loved ones are paying hundreds of thousands of pounds often just to ensure that an elderly person is fed, washed and dressed. Governments have failed to address the problem, many people are at risk of having to spend a lifetime savings and sell their family home to fund care. We cannot continue to let down those who have done so much for us. For the most basic needs, washing, dressing, and getting out of bed, people shouldn't have to pay to get the help they need, just as people don't have to pay to access the NHS at the point of use. It's not a question of we can't afford to do it. In all decency, we cannot afford not to. My motion makes no mention of the wider needs of older people, the costs of accommodation, for example, although it is sensible to observe that this area must also be addressed. We call upon the government to introduce free personal care by bringing forward a new social care contribution that will fund the policy on a sustainable basis. For our futures, for all generations, for fairness and dignity in old age, please support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. And which councillor is going to second? Councillor Hobson?
Formally seconded, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson. Okay, are there any other speakers on this particular item? Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Of course I agree with this. It's nonsense not to agree with it. It happens in Europe, happens all over the world. But I'm delighted that Councillor Mitchell said former governments, because I don't think any one single government can be blamed for the mistakes of this. It's all governments, and calling on this government and any future government to support this bill would only make sense. I think people who reach a certain age, and we'll get to this to counter Hunter and my own motion further on, there should be benefits. We've paid enough into the system, and we should not have to be taxed or paid more to be taken care of. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Callow?
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I'm very pleased that Councillor Mitchell has brought this notice of motion, because it's something, like he said, that will eventually affect us all. And I know from personal experience, a friend of my daughter's, sadly both of her parents have got dementia. They've had to sell the family home to pay for the care. Not only that, but she has a brother with severe learning difficulties that she is looking after. So you can imagine the heartbreak and the struggle that this family are having. They don't complain, but I think it's grossly unfair that these things happen to people who have worked hard all their lives, saved up, bought a house, and done their best for their families. And it is about time that every government that comes gets a grip on this. I sometimes wonder if those people down there at Westminster, of all political persuasions, actually know how the other half lives. Do they ever get on a bus? Do they go in a supermarket queue? I doubt it very much indeed. These things don't seem to affect them. They sit there in Parliament, and I've got to say this, Lady Mayor, they're on their mobile phones, they're laughing and joking, and they're talking about things that are going to affect us and our future generations. And I think it's about time that something was done, in particular on this, but also on their behaviour. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Callow. Anybody else wishing to speak on this particular motion? No? Okay. Councillor Mitchell, you have a right to reply if you wish to say anything. Okay, thank you. In which case, we'll move to the vote. All those in favour of this motion, please raise your hands. Oh, are unanimous. Wonderful. We like those. Brilliant. Fantastic. That's carried. Okay, the next notice of motion is Members' Code of Conduct. Councillor Gary Coleman, I believe you're going to propose.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. The proposal I put before you, please. At present, there is no council policy relating to what action should be taken by the monitoring officer in respect of a councillor who is subject to an initial assessment investigation into a breach of the Members' Code of Conduct when the councillor is ill or has a medical note signed by a doctor. Currently, a councillor may find themselves in a position where they are unable to continue to defend themselves or continue with the process as a result of ill health. This can result in the councillor having to make a life-changing decision when they are not in a fit and proper state to do so. The council feels that this is not a satisfactory practice and calls on the Standards Committee monitoring officer to introduce a policy that provides adequate assurance that an unwell councillor is not discriminated against when they are subject to an initial assessment investigation. I put this notice of motion before Council as a result of events that led up to former Councillor Ian Coleman stepping down from the office of Mayor last year.
Councillor Coleman, I've been advised that we can only hear this as a proposed motion. We can't hear it in respect of individuals because it is about process. So if we can stick to the process rather than individuals, that would be really helpful.
This comes as no surprise, Lady Mayor. Thank you. It's in front of your colleagues. It belongs to us all. It could happen to us all. So the situation turn out against us. I ask for you to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Do we have a seconder?
I formally second it, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Debbie Coleman. Okay, any other councillors wishing to speak on this particular motion? Councillor Campbell?
Thank you, Lady Mayor. So, I would like to remind members that an initial assessment or investigation takes place when there's a serious allegation against a councillor which relates to the Code of Conduct. The Council needs to take into account the interests of the complainant or complainants, especially if there's distress caused by the allegations, the councillor, and importantly, the Council itself, and its duty to consider allegations of misconduct seriously and act within a reasonable timescale. Each case needs to be taken on its merits. If there's an investigation and someone is ill, this does not halt the investigation, nor necessarily the involvement of the individual. The very same rules apply to employees who may face allegations under their Code of Conduct. A councillor who is ill or becomes unwell still has to be accountable for their actions when acting on behalf of the Council and as a holder of public office. The reputation of the Council and its members is of the utmost importance. So when allegations are received, the Council must act and be seen to act reasonably, promptly and proportionately. As office holders, rather than employees, a sick note does not apply to the role of a councillor, and one would not normally be issued by a GP. Councillors who face such allegations and are ill can have support put in place during such a process, for example, from colleagues or family members, including when being interviewed, or they can provide their accounts of events in a different way, such as a written response. There is a council-appointed, trained, independent person involved as part of the process, and these supporting arrangements would be taken into account based upon the individual circumstances. Councillors are also able to access the Employee Assistance Programme, and this support would also be offered alongside any support that may be provided by family, friends or colleagues. A set blanket policy would not be appropriate, as each set of circumstances are different, so therefore it is important that each case is looked at in its own merits. And it's for these reasons that I have just explained that the Labour Group will not be supporting this notice of motion. Also, for those new members that may be unsure of their obligations when it comes to the Councillor's Code of Conduct, training is being provided by Democratic Governance on the 2nd of July and also on the 23rd and 26th of September, which I would encourage all to attend. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Perfect timing, you're about to get cut off. Okay, any other councillors wishing to speak on this particular motion? Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I think my own colleague across the table answered it there when she said every situation is different and held as so far. I don't think that's the case. I actually think we do hold a blanket policy, and I do think that we do the same sort of exercise to anybody, regardless of individual conditions. And I'm not referring to Councillor Coleman's own particular situation. I'm not. I'm referring generally. I've experienced people who've gone through the same process, and I think we do present a blanket policy, and I think that's wrong. I think each individual case has to be gone through thoroughly and effectively, and I don't agree with it. So I will uphold this on my group role. as we think this is the right thing to do, to treat each one individually as each information and each evidence comes forward. Thank you.
Oh, that's a £5 fine, I'm pretty sure. You owe me a fiver. We like this. Councillor Brooks?
Yeah, thank you, Lady Mayor. I haven't prepared a contribution for this debate, but I thought it pertinent to rise and actually draw on my own experiences as a trade union shop steward, regional officer, negotiator and representative at hundreds, and I mean hundreds and possibly even thousands, of disciplinary investigations and disciplinary hearings. I've attended those hearings in the public sector, in central government, local government and the private sector. And I can honestly say, in every one of those cases, I have never been successful or even asked for a hearing or an investigation to be set aside or halted on the basis that somebody has a medical certificate. And the reality of the position is, and was when I was representing people in work, if you were guilty of misconduct, there cannot be an exception to the disciplinary or the rules of a company or an organisation by getting a sick note to cover that. The investigation has to continue and support has to be given to the individual. And Councillor Campbell's perfectly right, and Councillor Williams is perfectly right. Every case should be treated on its own merits. If we adopted this motion, we're going against employment practice and recognised procedures across all sectors, public, private, central government, local government, or whatever you care to mention. What's more, you're going against what we do to our own employees. As a Unison representative, I've actually been sacked on behalf of people who refused to attend disciplinary hearings because they had a medical certificate. I attended as a representative and got sacked on their behalf. That's the situation in industry. That's the situation in local government. But it's not about sacking. It talks about investigation meetings. And that's an opportunity for an individual to put forward his or her views and have the investigating officer, a professional from the council, to look at all the facts that are there. And I would expect the professionalism to shine through of our officers. And hopefully I'm never in that position, but I'd have confidence that the democratic services, or whoever's doing the investigation, would do it properly.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Any other speakers on this particular motion? No? Okay. Councillor Gary Coleman, right of reply?
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Obviously, I'm disappointed. One would hope that members opposite don't have a mini stroke when they're at an engagement and then it comes back on them.
Councillor Coleman, again, not individual circumstances.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Okay, Lady Mayor, could I ask for a recorded vote, please?
You can.
Thank you.
Yep. Can I need 5 members. I've had 3 so far. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so if we're going to move on to a recorded vote, then obviously I need to hand over to my colleagues on my left.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Members, recorded vote on the motion in the name of Councillor Coleman. Please could members indicate their answer with yes, no or abstain. Councillor Baker. Sorry, what was the...
Yes or no?
Councillor Blackburn.
No.
Councillor Brooks.
No.
Councillor Badess.
No.
Councillor Mrs Maxine Callow.
Yes.
Councillor Campbell.
No.
Councillor Clapham.
Yes.
Councillor Debbie Coleman.
Yes.
Councillor Gary Coleman.
Yes.
Councillor Collett.
No.
Councillor Cox.
Yes.
Councillor Critchley.
No.
Councillor Galley.
Yes.
Councillor Hobson.
No.
Councillor Hugo.
No.
Councillor Hunter.
No.
Councillor Hutton.
No.
Councillor Jackson.
No.
Councillor Kirkland.
No.
Councillor Matthews.
No.
Councillor Mitchell.
No.
Councillor O'Hara.
No.
Councillor Owen.
No.
Councillor Roberts? Yes. Councillor Robertson? Councillor Danny Scott?
Yes.
Councillor Rick Scott?
Yes.
Councillor Smith?
No.
Councillor Stansfield?
Yes.
Councillor Taylor?
No.
Councillor Walsh?
Yes.
Councillor Lynn Williams?
No.
Councillor Tony Williams?
Yes.
Councillor Wing?
Yes.
Councillor Wilshaw?
Yes.
Lady Mayor?
No.
Lady Mayor, members have voted as follows: 16 for the motion, 20 against.
Okay, so the motion has fallen. Okay, next motion is free TV licences. Councillor Hunter, I believe you are due to propose.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Lady Mayor. As the motion before you does clearly state, in 2017, the Conservative-led government made a manifesto pledge to protect the free television licence for the over 75s, and the motion calls on them clearly to do just that. When the BBC made their announcement a few weeks ago to scrap the free licence, it was met with justifiable horror in many quarters, not least of all in Blackpool, where there are many elderly and housebound people who see their TV as their only main link with the outside world. The cost of having to pay for their licences in the future would further impoverish many of these people and leave many isolated if they find themselves unable to pay. The excuse to link it with pension credit, frankly, is no answer at all, as many are unable to jump through the incredible hoops necessary to obtain pension credit in the first place. And it has to be said quite frankly that many who at present do not qualify for pension credit are not well off to begin with. The simple fact, though, remains that the Conservative government are the guilty party here, as it is they who have cut the BBC funding drastically, thereby forcing this situation. This is in stark contrast to the last Labour government, who saw to it that the BBC were properly funded in the first place, thereby ensuring that all TV licences for the over 75s were free. As a council, there is little that we can actually do on a matter such as this, but we can protest, and we must protest, and that is what I'm asking us to do by passing this motion. I believe we must pass it because, in my opinion, if we are to fulfil our proud boast that we truly care for the well-being of our residents, especially the most vulnerable, some of whom will be badly hit if these heinous proposals go ahead. I move.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. And we need a councillor to second, please.
Formally second, Lady Mayor.
Thank you very much. No. I think that was actually a point of order. My God. That doesn't happen very often. Okay, councillors to speak on this particular motion. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I mean, it's quite obvious to Councillor Hunter we're going to support this because I put the same motion in myself. And I believed every word of your sentiment until you got to the Conservative government. You know, why do you want to make it political? Nobody agrees to this. The BBC, and I'll quote you this, yep, the total number of staff at the BBC, this is for everyone's interest, just to show you how important the BBC is to this country. The BBC's total number of staff is 35,402. That's full-time and flexible. Since its conception in 1927, the BBC has played an important role in British history and delivered no less than 33 wartime speeches, all of which were carried out by the BBC radio service from Winston Churchill. It also allowed the then-exiled Charles de Gaulle to broadcast to the free French people not to capitulate to the Germans. It's had to battle against the introduction of commercial TV, pirate radio station, and it has continued to hold a position as the most respected and prominent broadcaster in the world. During the last Labour government, Tony Blair announced free licences to all those over 75 years of age, and I welcomed that move. I thought it was one of the best policies that came out of the Labour government. However, in 2015, the Conservative government, guided by George Osborne, struck a deal under which the subsidy would be phased out by 2020, with the broadcaster having to shoulder the cost of free TV licences. I didn't agree with that whatsoever. Since its Royal Charter status, which was revised in 2017, the BBC became a statutory corporation totally independent from direct government intervention, with its activities and decision being overseen by the BBC board and generated and regulated by Ofcom. So, as much as I agree with your sentiment, it would have been more genuine if you'd said you wanted to write to the BBC General. But I don't care who we write to. I'll write to the Queen. I'll write to anybody. In fact, I don't think 75 is young enough. I wouldn't mind free licences from being 65. I wouldn't say free licences altogether, because we'll lose a heck of a chunk of quality broadcasting if we did so. And you'd get a load of adverts on there. So we will agree with your motion, Councillor Hunter. But unfortunately, my motion says we're right to the BBC General, who is the real reason why we're losing these licences. I can tell you lots of Conservative MPs in the House have debated this, and they're just as horrified as you and I are.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Mrs Callow.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Well, like Councillor Williams, I certainly share his sentiments. We all agree that this is a disgrace, and I think it is a great pity that the proposer has gotten so political that we don't feel that we can actually support him because of that, which is a great pity. When he says that the government has drastically cut the funding and shifted the responsibility and costs. Well, what did Gordon Brown do when he was the Chancellor? The first thing he did was to get the Bank of England to set the rate, the interest rate. That's what he did. He shifted his responsibilities. I know that successive governments have gone along with it, but it was Gordon Brown who introduced that. He moved that over, and a very clever move, actually, so that he couldn't be criticised. But the BBC, in my opinion, waste an awful lot of money. You can be watching any programme, particularly with the news, and they've got reporters that are popping up from all over the world. And I ask myself, are they on a retainer? They may only speak to them once every 3 years. It's amazing the staff that they've got. And actually, somebody needs to go in there to the BBC with a fine-tooth comb and get out all the dead wood, so that then these free licences can continue for needy people. That £150 a year that they've got to find is a positive disgrace. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Callow. Any other speakers on this motion? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Can I just remind Councillor Hunter that the BBC held a public consultation back in November 2018 to decide whether the concessions to the over 75s should continue after 2020. 52% of the respondents approved of abolishing the licence fees, and as a result it was decided to discontinue the full concession. So before Councillor Hunter starts laying blame solely at the feet of the government, we may want to question the BBC's decision to save an estimated £754 million. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Any others on this particular motion? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I had the privilege the other week of representing you, Lady Mayor, at the Pensioners' Parliament here in Blackpool. And this was one of the subjects that was discussed at that meeting. And the strength of feeling from that packed assembly that day against this decision was absolutely amazing. And I think these people were right. And here in Blackpool, as Councillor Hunter said, the number of residents in Blackpool who fall into this category is immense. And we have a duty to defend these people who, many of them, the television is their only source of comfort, their only source of conversation. They'll talk to the television because it's the only person they can talk to sometimes. And it is essential for these people to have this contact with the outside world. And I really do think this was a disgraceful decision, and it doesn't matter who made it, whether it was the BBC or whether it was the government, but they certainly passed the buck to the BBC and ducked the issue after making the promise to keep it there. And I think we should support this motion this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Any other speakers? Okay, Councillor Hunter, right to reply.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Just very briefly, I don't want to get into a ding-dong across the council chamber here, particularly on a highly political matter, which it seems to have become that. Given that the other side...
All right, okay, ladies and gents, please. If we can just let Councillor Hunter have his right to reply.
Given that the other side of the chamber have said through Councillor Williams that they will support this motion.
Councillor Williams, please.
Any need for that? Yes, I think write to whoever we want to write to, as long as we can get this decision reversed. But I would say, first and foremost, the people we should write to should be Her Majesty's government, the Conservative-led government, whatever you want to call it, Conservative-led government, because they are the ones who did not properly fund the BBC in the first place. And I repeat again that the previous Labour government adequately funded the BBC to enable it to fulfil its useful purpose. Therefore, to me, the appropriate people to write to are the government and ask them, as Councillor Jackson just said, to honour their manifesto pledge. I move.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Okay, we're going to move to the vote. All those in... Fiver. That's 5 of you. Thank you.
Lady Mayor, members, recorded vote on the motion in the name of Councillor Hunter. Please could members indicate their answer with either yes, no or abstain. Councillor Baker? No. Councillor Blackburn?
Yes.
Councillor Brooks?
Yes.
Councillor Badess?
Yes.
Councillor Mrs Maxine Callow?
No.
Councillor Campbell?
Yes.
Councillor Clapham? No. Councillor Debbie Coleman?
Yes, sorry.
Councillor Gary Coleman?
Yes.
Councillor Collett?
Yes.
Councillor Cox?
No.
Councillor Critchley?
Yes.
Councillor Galley?
No.
Councillor Hobson?
Yes.
Councillor Hugo?
Yes.
Councillor Hunter?
Yes.
Councillor Hutton?
Yes.
Councillor Jackson?
Yes.
Councillor Kirkland?
Yes.
Councillor Matthews?
Yes.
Councillor Mitchell?
Yes.
Councillor O'Hara?
Yes.
Councillor Owen?
Yes.
Councillor Roberts?
No.
Councillor Robertson? Councillor Danny Scott?
No.
Councillor Rick Scott?
No.
Councillor Smith?
Yes.
Councillor Stansfield?
No.
Councillor Taylor?
Yes.
Councillor Walsh?
No.
Councillor Lynn Williams? Councillor Tony Williams?
No.
Councillor Wing?
No.
Councillor Wilshaw?
No.
Lady Mayor?
Yes.
Lady Mayor, members have voted as follows: 22 for the motion, 14 against.
Thank you very much. And that motion is carried. Okay, moving on to motion E, declaring a climate change emergency. Councillor Blackburn, I believe you're going to move this particular motion.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. As you can see, the motion is very extensive. This is predominantly a model motion that has been circulated to all local authorities in the UK. I have added a couple of bits to it. Crucially, page 59, the first full bullet point on the motion. Furthermore, this council makes clear its fundamental opposition to the practice of fracking. The council will not allow its lands to be used for fracking. And also, finally, the Local Government Association the Council will invite in a group of experts from the LGA to advise on what steps can be taken quickly to have the greatest possible impact on air quality, modal shift away from private cars, increased take-up of public transport, to ensure that every aspect of the Council's activities are cited on the need to preserve Blackpool's ecological and environmental heritage. I think it's really important that we don't just pass a motion and then nothing happens. This is an issue that needs to be dealt with here and now. I have children, many people in the room have children or grandchildren. Hugely important that this is an issue that we tackle, and we tackle like we mean it. I encourage the whole chamber to support the motion. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Collett.
Happy to formally second, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Collett. Do we have any other speakers on this particular motion? Councillor Galley.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I am delighted to support this motion, and from a personal perspective, I've always believed that we can all make a difference from a personal level in everything that we do at a very micro level. Councillor Critchley has been prompting me for several weeks now about my terrible use of plastics and the amount of water I drink. So I have unleashed one of my Christmas presents as a result of Councillor Critchley's lobbying. But there is a serious point around that. We can all make a difference, be it car sharing or use of public transport and so on. But I actually see as well something far deeper in terms of how we use green energy to do something really important in Blackpool, and that is to reduce poverty. If we can reduce our energy costs per household, because we've got solar panels on our roofs and so on, that can have a massive impact on some of our fixed costs, on some of our poorest citizens. So I actually see this as a real opportunity to do a lot of different things, to hit different targets for 2030, but ultimately to improve the life of our citizens, Lady Mayor, and also to generate an income for the council around different uses of energy, be that the huge amount of wind power that we could potentially be tapping into. So I see it not only as something that we should do, but something that we should want to do.
Thank you, Councillor Galley. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Of course I welcome this. I mean, we're stupid not to. It's a legacy for our families, our children and theirs afterwards. But I am mindful that Mother Nature herself does a very good job of cleansing when she needs to. When she gets fed up of us, she'll flick us off her back like fleas off a dog. She'll do that, no doubt whatsoever. But I'm also pleased to see that for the first time since Councillor Mitchell's motion, which was some time ago, about the council single-use plastic, that we've started to make a change by having paper cups. However, we still haven't gone far enough. And it's been some time since Councillor Mitchell put that proposal forward, which we all unanimously agreed on. So I think we could be showing to be doing more than we're doing already. And the cigarette butts outside, etc., are all part of it. Yeah, I'm sure we're delighted to support this in every way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Rick Scott? Got it right, sorry.
Lady Mayor. I'd just like to point out, as an observation really, that we've got a state-of-the-art tramway, which is clean and efficient, but then we've got double-decker buses going along the same route, spewing out diesel fumes. I mean, I can't, you know, I don't know why that is.
Councillor Scott, you might want to talk to one of your other members afterwards. I'm just giving you a hint. He might want to tell you lots of things about that and why that's not a thing. Any other speakers? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I have to admit that I didn't actually propose the motion on plastic. That was somebody else. I'm delighted to support this motion. We're now in the middle of a stark global crisis. We can either act as though in denial, procrastinating and pontificating, or we could set out an escape route for the planet. And step one is to recognise the crisis we are facing. We are seeing the effects of global warming already, with extreme weather and changes in ecosystems. It is predicted that 2/3 of polar bears will disappear by 2050. Climate change will result in the extinction of many species. The poorest areas of the world will be affected most. We must act now. It's cut greenhouse gas emissions and introduce new ways of living. I'm delighted about the setting up of the Citizens Assembly and the Climate Change Partnership Group. There are so many people outside this chamber who can teach us so much. And we can play a part by encouraging public transport instead of private car use, not least by promoting Blackpool transport. This motion confirms the Council's opposition to fracking. There are those of us, including myself, who wish this had been set out long ago. We are not going to be beholden to a government determined to push through a policy supported by a few, well-heeled and well-connected, but opposed by the great majority of the communities it affects. We will drive the frackers out so they are forced to look at new ways of profiteering elsewhere, while we act in the interests of the planet. Urge colleagues to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Danny Scott.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. First of all, I am going to vote for this here. I think it's an excellent plan, an excellent idea. There's a lot of work on here, and it does state things like net zero carbon by 2030 and a few other little policies along the way. And it looks absolutely brilliant. Love it. But I always judge work to be done by work that's actually in place at this moment in time. And I'm a little bit worried that about a year ago, excuse me, Councillor Williams has just mentioned, it's still a little bit of a thunder perhaps, but we set up a single-use plastic committee, which through a motion through chambers here, disappeared, and the duties were handed over to officers, I believe, within the council. At that particular time, I did suggest in here, and there was quite a few agreements, nods and yeses, that we should lead the way, as Councillor Blackburn has said before, that you try to lead the way. And I thought it would be a brilliant idea if Blackpool Council could become the first place in Blackpool to be a single-use plastic firm, company, whatever. 1 year later, I don't think we're any closer. There was a few glasses brought in by staff, maybe, or by people for use, but there is not enough. We haven't done the job. If we can't do a simple job as change Blackpool Council into to get rid of a single-use plastic format, how are you expected to do all this? And this is a year has passed. You've got only 10.5 years to do this, and this looks like a lot of hard graft. So, although I'm going to vote for it, I really am going to say to you, good luck in this one. Thank you.
Councillor Collett.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I'm glad people are supporting this motion. It's brilliant. It was actually Councillor Alistair Humphreys who brought this motion originally. And I don't know if other people remember, or maybe it's just my recollection. I know it was supported, but it was extremely criticised about how far this motion would go and what his motion would go and where it would achieve by our opposition. So I think it's brilliant that you've all stood up now and had a change of tune, especially Ms. Mayor, what Councillor Scott has just said, because that's not what my recollection from the original motion was at all. So I'm just thankful that everyone suddenly had a change of heart, and it's brilliant. I just thought I'd point that out. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Scott.
So there was no change of mind. I stated that.
That's not a point of order.
Well, whatever.
Please sit back down, Councillor Scott. It's not a point of order. Councillor Scott, it is not a point of order. You have been asked to sit down. Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Callow.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I do take great exception to what Councillor Collett said, because I was a member of that committee, that subcommittee, about the plastics. And there were Conservatives on there and there were Labour. And it was unanimous that we should do something about it. And the recommendation was that the officers reported back to the relevant scrutiny committee on a 6-monthly basis to tell us what progress was being made. But we're all concerned about things like plastic. And it's heartbreaking when you see the television and animals that have got plastic wrapped round their necks, or they're trying to feed the young with a piece of plastic. It is really very, very worrying. But we were all in agreement on this, and we formed a subcommittee, we had a scrutiny, and we got a good result at the end of the day, and it was all party. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councillor Mrs Callow. What I would say is, can we return to the subject of this particular motion? If there's anything that anybody wants to bring up about a previous motion, can we make sure we do it in the right way? That would be really helpful, just so that we can move progress. So, any other speakers that would like to speak on this particular motion about this motion? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. Yes, I want to fully support the motion, although I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to do everything that the leader wants me to do. I will certainly try. I was down in Telford last week at the Special Interest Group for the Coastal Communities, which also coincided with a 3-day conference at Telford. And one of the big issues that over that 3 days was climate change. And of course, all the coastal resorts, coastal towns in this country are suffering from the results of climate change. And one of the things that I saw was a lady who lives in the Cromer area in Norfolk, and she showed me on her iPhone, on her mobile phone, a little video of something that happened down there only last week, I believe, or the week before. And this Environment Agency man was on the beach when all of a sudden the beach started crumbling, and within minutes the change in that scenery and the way that that cliff collapsed in a matter of minutes was absolutely incredible. And I think people are at last recognising that climate change is real. We've had lots of people, including presidents across the waters, who ignore it and say it's not happening. It is happening, and we're seeing the results. And this is so important for the people of Blackpool, and I fully support it, and I hope we can move forward. I've had one councillor come to me prior to the meeting to say that she would love to serve on the Assembly group and in other ways if she can, and I'm sure there will be other members of the council who want to support, and it's vital that we do it, so I fully support it.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Lady Mayor. When you think that our planet has been here for something like 4.5 billion years, and you encapsulate that in one day, 24 hours, you know, humanity has been here for 1 minute and 13 seconds of that day. You know, we've been industrialised for about 1 second of that day, and you see what we've done to the planet. The wonderful Carl Sagan, 20-odd years ago, said, you know, this is the only planet we have. We have nowhere else. There's nowhere else to go. There's nobody coming to help us. So it's down to us. We are just we're custodians of this planet. It doesn't belong to us. As Councillor Williams said, you know, the world won't be destroyed. The world will carry on. Humanity might disappear if we don't get our act together. So I think this is a fantastic motion and more than happy to support it. Thank you, Lady Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Any other speakers on this motion? Okay, Councillor Blackburn, like to reply?
Thank you, Lady Mayor. I'm very grateful for the contributions of members across the chamber. If they're the same cups that we use in my office, Councillor Scott, they're paper. I see. And my understanding was they were fully biodegradable, but I will double check that. Just as a general point through you, Lady Mayor, I would always encourage members to resist when officers tell you that it's all right, you can leave this with us now and we'll report back to you at 6-monthly intervals. It's not for me to tell scrutiny how to operate, but that always strikes me as a bit of a recipe for not much happening. There is a great deal in this motion. I have every confidence in Councillor Jackson's abilities to deliver on all of it. Sure, you'll be absolutely fine. I can, however, help Councillor Scott with his inquiry. I'm sure Councillor Galley's already pointed out to you by now that our modern fleet of buses do not spew diesel fumes up and down the promenade. Two other reasons for running that bus route. One is that pensioners who are not from Lancashire are not able to use their concessionary passes on the trams. So if they wish to travel for free, they need a bus on which to do it. The second reason for operating that bus route is to stop anybody else operating that bus route who might have diesel spewing vehicles unlike ours. So I trust that assists. So with that, Lady Mayor, I suggest we move to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blackburn. Moving to the vote, all those in favour, please show your hands. Fantastic. Ooh, another unanimous vote. Yay! Moving on to the final motion of the evening, removal of free TV licence to those over the age of 75. Good luck with this one, Councillor Williams.
Oh, I wonder where this is going. Councillor Hunter, you could have had a clean sweep, except you try to make it political. All night we've had a very harmonious and friendly meeting, which is different to a lot of previous meetings. This is a newer council, and I think we're committed to working closer together. So what a shame you spoilt that. And if you think the headline is going to be Conservatives that won't support 75 free licences, you're wrong. We thoroughly support it. And in fact, can I read you something? The headline in The Guardian on the 10th of June 2019, BBC confirms plans to make over 75 pay the TV licence. Well, you can get the chief executive to write to the government. They can't do anything about it. If they could, believe you me, they would. But if you write to the BBC's Director General, he's the chap who makes all the decisions. Him and the board are the ones who've decided to stop this. And when you write to him, ask him to cut his salary, these directors' salaries, and all the people that work at ridiculously high amounts of money for doing very little and with very small amounts of talent. That's where the problem lies. But don't forget the size of the broadcasting business. It's huge. So the question is, who do we write to? Well, it won't be the cleaners at the BBC. It won't be the Speaker at Parliament. It's got to be the Director General. Now, I know it's tit for tat, so I dare say that because we didn't support yours, and the reason why was because you tried to make it political. And that doesn't do any good at all. I'm not making it political. I want to blame the people who are making this decision. So that's my motion, and I hope, despite the differences we had, you can support this motion, because we truly are, all of us, committed into stopping this travesty. Everyone over 75, in fact, I believe 65, should get a free licence. Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And can I ask for a councillor to second, please? You are seconding it, Councillor Clapham, I believe.
No, I didn't know whether there'd been an arrangement made, you know, but...
Clearly not.
I don't
Councillor
even
Clapham.
need to declare an interest either on the age bit. I've still 3 years to go on that, or 2.5. So it gives me great pleasure, certainly, to second this motion. And it is non-political, and I hope we get everybody's support.
Thank you, Councillor Clapham. Any other speakers on this particular motion? Councillor Blackburn?
Yeah, thank you, Lady Mayor. The government has an unfortunate habit of cost shunting and blame shunting. The question that was asked, the question that was asked earlier on about council tax collection rates, the government used to fully fund council tax benefit. They then stopped fully funding it, shunted the responsibility onto local authorities, which has meant that the poorest people in society are having to pay up to 30% of the council tax bill. Then Conservative councillors ask us why we're not collecting the full amount of council tax, because the government has shunted the cost onto us. This happens in all areas of public policy. It's something that the government has done. What they've done here is they've withdrawn the funding from the BBC and shunted the cost and the blame onto the BBC. It's because this funding tapers out in 2020 that the BBC have made the decision that they've made. Councillor Williams sounds like he's got a real downer on the BBC. I wonder if they turned him down for Top of the Pops in the late 60s. Oh, you were on it. You were on it. It just didn't go well. Unfortunately, we can't support this motion because the earlier motion, the earlier motion proposed by Councillor Hunter quite properly targets the blame where the blame needs to be targeted upon the government. If we were to support this motion, that would be the equivalent of us criticising ourselves for cutting services in every budget because the government have withdrawn our grant. There's a deep lack of intellectual clarity in the argument. We must target the people who imposed the cut in the first place. And in this case, it's the government, it's not the BBC. So we should say no to this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Councillor Brooks?
Yeah, thank you, Lady Mayor. I made a vow to myself, actually, that when I came on the council, I was going to try and avoid yarboo politics and points scoring. Sorry. Here we go. No, in all seriousness, I think the phrase that we're shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted springs to mind over this resolution before the council tonight. I took part in the consultation. All my family took part in the sham consultation that the BBC were forced into that said, do you want both legs cut off or just one leg being cut off? And I took part in that consultation, and hundreds of thousands of other people did, to say, let's keep free TV licences. You're quite right. The BBC Director General was given the option, you carry on subsidising it, you carry on funding it. But the consequence of that is to withdraw and weaken and dilute the programme content that's available on the BBC. Now, I, like you, value the BBC very much. I value the contribution it makes to all our lives, but particularly to the over 75s. And I have to say that Councillor Blackburn talks about the cuts that have been imposed on local government. It's the sleight of hand policy that the government continually imposes on local government in all manner of things. Oh no, possibly all governments, but at least when people ask a question, I wish once in a while they'd answer the question, rather than just saying, we're spending more now than we've ever spent before. It's absolute nonsense, and hypocrisy rings loud on this issue, because days after they've announced that they're going to cut the TV licence for over 75s, there are government ministers and government officials lining up to celebrate the D-Day, 75th anniversary of D-Day. What they're not saying is that they voted earlier to take the TV licence off many of those people that they're crying crocodile tears over. And it's the government. It's hypocrisy in the highest example.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Any other speakers on this particular motion? I'm going to suggest that we move to the vote. Oh, sorry, right to reply. I do apologise, Councillor Williams.
Right. Thank you, Lady Mayor. Councillor Blackburn's nearly right. We are missing not just a complex issue, we're missing a simplistic issue. The 2017 Royal Charter gave the BBC the power to do whatever they want. And it was the Director General that made the decision to carry on with funding for the government or to go their own way, which then gave them the freedom to sell programmes abroad through the BBC Works. I mean, I've worked for the BBC. I know how the system works. And I'd be interested to know, Councillor Brooks, which committee of politicians voted for this reduction? Because I don't remember or hear any papers or recall about that being a constitutional vote. I don't think it was. This was a decision made by the BBC. Any government, whether it's Labour, I congratulated Tony, what's his name? Blair. No, it wasn't Gordon Brown. No, he was the Chancellor. Tony Blair made the decision in his manifesto speech. And I congratulate that. It was worth, you can't speak here and you've already spoken. You know, you can quote all this as hypocrisy, whatever you want. The problem is, we have made it political. With the first motion on this subject, we've made it political, and we're allowing those politics to get in the way of common sense. You didn't vote for us, so we won't vote for you. I've not blamed the Labour government for this. I've blamed the BBC. I've no idea which way the chairman of the BBC votes or his politics. I would say that I don't think the BBC are very particularly friendly with the Conservative Party or support the Conservative Party. So I'm just disappointed that you've tried to make political points, that you've tried to make the decision political. We could have had a unanimous vote on both policies. But as it is, someone's made it political, and that is disgraceful. When we're here to represent the people of Blackpool, we shouldn't be throwing individual politics or parties at each other. It'll do no good whatsoever. And nobody out there watching this will be either impressed or think you're more wonderful because you've got a smarter answer. The truth is, people over 75 should have free licence. In fact, I bring the age down. So if you don't want to vote for my motion, fine. I'll write to them. I'll write to them myself, and I'll put it in writing, and all my group will sign it. So it's only half the council anyway, so it has half the power. I'm disappointed.
Okay, all right.
No, there's four members different, isn't there? That's all.
All right, enough. Can
See
we
what
let
I mean?
Councillor Williams continue?
Lady Mayor,
Carry on.
do you see
Please
what I mean
please
about
carry on.
trying to make it political? How childish. How utterly, utterly childish.
Councillor Williams, if we can...
Thank you, Lady Mayor.
Thank you.
I'll sit down and request a recorded vote.
Fantastic, thank you. Can I have 5 members show for a recorded vote? Thank you very much. We'll take a recorded vote.
Lady Mayor, members, recorded vote on the motion in the name of Councillor Tony Williams. Please could members indicate their answer with yes, no or abstain. Councillor Baker? Yes. Councillor Blackburn? No. Councillor Brooks? No. Councillor Badess? No. Councillor Mrs Maxine Callow? Yes. Councillor Campbell? No. Councillor Clapham? Yes. Councillor Debbie Coleman? Yes. Councillor Gary Coleman? Yes. Councillor Collett? Councillor Cox? Yes. Councillor Critchley? No. Councillor Galley? Yes. Councillor Hobson? No. Councillor Hugo? No. Councillor Hunter? No. Councillor Hutton? No. Councillor Jackson? No. Councillor Kirkland? No. Councillor Matthews? Councillor Mitchell? No. Councillor O'Hara? No. Councillor Owen? No. Councillor Roberts? Yes. Councillor Robertson? Councillor Danny Scott? Yes. Councillor Rick Scott? Yes. Councillor Smith? No. Councillor Stansfield? Yes. Councillor Taylor? Councillor Walsh? Yes. Councillor Lynn Williams? No. Councillor Tony Williams? Yes. Councillor Wing? Yes. Councillor Wilshaw? Yes. Lady Mayor?
No.
Lady Mayor, members have voted as follows: 16 for the motion, 20 against.
Thank you very much. So the motion falls, and that concludes the business of today's meeting. Thank you very much, folks.